There's some people in the waiting room. Oh, okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lisa Cox. I work for the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality in Portland, and I help administer the Oregon Applied Sustainability Internship Program. Right now, we are in Corvallis with a group of 20 folks and all of our interns, if you can't see us. And we're just so excited to kick off our summer symposium. And I'm going to start off with a brief overview of the program. We're going to be here from 10 to noon-ish. Today, we're going to have one break, and we're going to hear from 7 of our incredibly talented and motivated students today, and I can't wait to hear from them all. So I want to start to let everyone know a little bit about the program. We connect highly qualified students with Oregon businesses to help them meet their sustainability and pollution prevention goals. Our summer interns are paid through a really great grant from the EPA Pollution Prevention Program, and we're so grateful for that partnership. The program focuses on prevention, which is the first step that we believe is most important in terms of process in our manufacturing manufacture. We want to look at the very top of the chain to understand how we can prevent emissions, prevent water use from the very start. And our interns are trained and focused on doing that work for the businesses across the state. The interns collect data, they support research, they are in the field sometimes getting information for their host businesses. They're traveling across the entire state to collect data, and they're trained at the very beginning and supported by mentors and advisors. So we have this really amazing team of people that help the students, including folks from the DEQ, Department of Energy, the Pollution Prevention Research Center, and several of our other just partners that have connected with the program over the last 8 years. And in fact, we've had over 50 partners that support this program over the years. So we're really just very honored and very pleased that the program has continued for the last 8 years. The basic timeline is that we get businesses on board in the very beginning. They apply, go through a pretty rigorous application process. We train them to help them understand our goals, and we want to know their goals, because the key is that we're helping them obtain the resources and technical assistance that they may need that's free to help them meet their goals. So we're really proud of that. In March and April, we recruit students. They also go through a rigorous application process, many pages, and we obtain some really incredible students, which are here today. They're paid. It's an 11-week internship program, and today we are here because we are celebrating their successes together. Like I mentioned before, OASIS is a partnership. It's funded primarily through an EPA pollution prevention grant, and it's a competitive process. And this year, Oregon Sea Grants is administering that grant, and Oregon DEQ helps coordinate the implementation. So since 2017, we've paired Oregon businesses with interns of 42 across the state with 38 interns. And we're just really, I don't know, just it makes my heart like smile, if that's a big to see how much success we've had. And it's not because of like 1 or 2 people. It's because of this partnership with the businesses who are willing to take a chance, with us to help them. It's the students who are working extremely hard. It's our mentors across the state, including our academic advisors. And we're just so excited to have had so many really great projects throughout the years. We focus on the industries that you see listed here that are a requirement of our grants, and we're able to branch out a little bit. Like Brain helped us implement the projects that were for the food and beverage industry. So through those partnerships, we've had a really great success. Here's some of our partners or businesses that we've had in the past and currently. And again, we just need to have a big party at some point. In the park or something fun, because all of these businesses have done such incredible work with us. We typically have amazing savings that have been recommended by the students that typically are like water savings, hazardous waste reduction, and certainly economic savings. And through the years, we've had really just the annual contribution or the total contribution over the years has just really told an incredible story. And honestly, these are very conservative numbers. This is like a snapshot for just that year. This is not a cumulative over 8 years. And we're just so thrilled that these businesses are actually implementing. They're taking the time, the energy, and money to implement the recommendations that the students have provided. So I'm going to stay on that slide just for 1 minute so you all can read it. And then finally, I probably talked really fast. I had 7 minutes. I went back. So in the end, here are the folks that administer the program. We have the people from Oregon Sea Grant, myself, and then this year we've had a couple of assistants, which have been really critical in getting our LinkedIn pages really engaging. So follow us on LinkedIn so that you can see the progress from all the students. And so you can hire them because they're really, really amazing. You can find all their contact information today at their end of their slides or on LinkedIn because they are really incredible. They deserve jobs in the environmental workforce. And I'd love to have them work for me. So I know that's not possible, but maybe someday. Maybe someday. Okay, that's what I have today. Can I see the agenda? Okay, so up first, Lane, do you want to introduce?
Yeah.
Or do you want me to take it? We're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 8 really amazing presentations. And we're gonna get started with Sage, the first one.
And here we will see you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for the introduction. Yeah, so to the introductions, I guess a little bit more in depth into getting into it, but I'm saying Shane, I'm very excited to be presenting today. So my presentation and internship with Triple Farms covers sugar production and is focused on identifying and sustained production of agricultural goods via comparative life cycle assessments. So just a little bit about me to get familiar before we get started. My name is Sage Hinkie, she for pronouns. I'm currently a senior at Lincoln University and I'm pursuing a dual degree in philosophy and environmental science. I'm particularly interested in environmental ethics, justice, and sustainable agriculture, so Triple is very good fit for those reasons. I'm also originally from Independence, Oregon. So overall, the presentation is in this particular order. It's going to cover as a subscription, sort of the responsibilities associated with the project that I was doing, some details on the project, and the results that I found, and then just what I personally gleaned from the internship experience. So the business that I was paired with, Triple Farms, is located in Midville, Oregon, which is also very convenient from where I go to school. It's an insect agriculture operation focusing in the diversion of pre-consumer food waste. So pre-consumer meaning it's going to be food waste that has not touched the mouths or the hands of people at large. And so it would be food waste like someone doesn't finish their meal at the restaurant, that gets tossed out. That can't be intercepted by Chick-fil-A, but something like the produce that was deemed too ugly to go to the grocery store sort of deal. That would otherwise be landfilled is instead intercepted by Chick-fil-A and then broken down by its flexible fly larvae. So one of these little images is sort of like the trays of larvae. And there's like thousands of tons, hundreds of thousands of these larvae in the pilot facility. And then also right next to you can see like a more up close image of what these larvae look like right before they're ready to be harvested. And from those larvae, Chick-fil-A gets 2 main components. It's going to be frass and whole dried larvae. So frass is just insect excrement, and it includes their exoskeleton, as well as, to put it more plainly, insect poop, and it makes a really great soil amendment, due to the chitin found in the exoskeleton, and then also the microbial properties that it implements and possesses. And then full dried larvae is just the larvae at this stage in the image there, right before they reach pupation, where they are fortunately killed so that they can be used as livestock feed because they're just absolutely packed with protein. So my project specifically was focused on utilizing the life cycle assessment data to compare the products of Japool to other similar products on the market. So life cycle assessment is going to be a holistic view of product or system as consecutive and intermittent stages from raw material acquisition or generation from natural resources to final disposal. So it's just a really in-depth way to understand the emissions and processes associated with the production of any product in particular, depending on what you are interested in looking at. And so using that data, I was able to compare the products that Chipotle produces to other similar products. Also, there was some remaining time towards the end of the internship, and that was allocated to global credit market research, just to see where Chipotle might fit in there, as well as if there are any markets for their co-products. And those co-products include things like dead flies in the process, or the exoskeletons that don't get mixed in with the grass, things like that. So a little bit of time spent there. And so the project itself began with deciding upon which products would be most comparable to Chipotle products. That was based on function of the products, but also the availability of the data. And Chipotle already was working with a life cycle assessment database called Plan Forward, and so most of the products, or actually being all of them, had to be available in that database. And then also in terms of their function for products compared to fracs, we're interested in other soil amendments or fertilizers, so things like nitrogen fertilizer, phosphorus fertilizer, compost, manure. And then products to compare to full dried larvae would be other livestock feeds or livestock feed ingredients that end up being things like pea protein, soybean protein, cornmeal, things like that. So then came the collection of the CO2 equivalent emissions. So CO2 equivalent was used as the metric to compare emissions. So that is the metric that Plan Forward, the database that we're working with, uses. And so it's just essentially a way to even out any greenhouse gas emission is then converted into something that would make it more comparable to that of CO2. So it includes other greenhouse gases like methane, but it's all converted into one singular unit just for ease of comparison. So all of that data was found in one database, Plan Forward, and then data concerning the nutrients of the products were found on a variety of sources, from government, educational, and then in some cases, commercial online sources, to compare for frass the phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium content of the alternative products, and then for the full dried larvae to compare the protein content of the alternative products. And then there was some research done on the utility of all of these products, because it wasn't as though I was comparing Chippole's frass to another company's frass to my frass. It was instead frass as compared to various kinds of fertilizers, etc. And so understanding the differences in the utility of those products was very important, and just illustrating that it wasn't an apples to apples type comparison. They're not the exact same product, but they do serve similar functions or are found in similar products. And then this image here is just an example of some of the charts that ended up being an output of this process. So you can sort of see this is nitrogen concentration for products that would be compared to frass. This is a list of almost all of the products that ended up being compared. Frass had 11 alternatives, and then full dried larvae, there were 6 alternatives. But yeah, essentially just got the nitrogen content of these various products. In terms of the results for the overall project, ended up finding that frass generally had a wider breadth of nutrients available than most of the other alternatives. It was most comparable to manure or compost in the different nutrients available, which is why I ended up actually having more materials related to those products in specific. In the top left corner there, the emissions intensity for, say, like phosphate, as well as nitrogen and potassium in sort of clockwise order. all of those graphs, as you can see, include grass, compost, and in the one case manure. Manure was an interesting case in that on the Plant 4 database, they accounted 0 CO2 equivalent emissions for the production of manure because it was seen as a necessary product of other industries. So I was unable to compare it to grass in terms of the nutrient composition because the calculations that I was doing would then just have me divide the concentration of nutrients by 0 emissions anyhow. So even though manure was necessarily comparable to grass, it didn't end up being a part of a lot of the plant products. But even so, as compared to both compost and manure, grass did have higher concentrations of those important nutrients that we were looking for when they're buying soil amendments. And also evident in 3 of these figures here is the emissions associated with the concentration of nutrients. And as you can see, there's a sort of large discrepancy between the emissions associated with dry frass and that wet frass. And also dry frass ends up landing in a relatively comparable area to that of the alternative products. However, it is important to note that Chipotle is still in its pilot stages as an operation, whereas many of these other products have been utilized and tested for like decades upon decades. So even though these emissions appear comparable now, I guess there's a lot of time and room for improvements, and also these are accounting for sort of worst case scenario energy usage on Chipotle's part. And then also super exciting, Chipotle's wet frass has some of the lowest emissions across the board, accounting for emissions per nutrient concentration or just emissions period. And the second only to that of urea and compost, I want to say. And then in terms of pickle dried larvae, it also ended up being relatively comparable to the alternatives in terms of emissions per nutrient concentration. But again, pilot stages and also accounting for the worst case scenario energy usage. And then one of the last most notable findings was this large difference between the emissions associated with the wet and dry frass. And so that led into some of the P2 recommendations that I ended up delivering. This is the P2 table in its glory. So all of these recommendations are associated with the drying process of either the larvae or the frass, because that is where the majority of those emissions come from, or the majority of their energy usage is allocated to the drying process. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of letters and not as many numbers up there, and that's sort of because Chipotle is in the process of moving from their pilot facility into a larger commercial facility, and so decisions concerning what exact machinery and also the energy sources that they're using are still sort of in a decisive phase. And so those calculations were unable to be determined at this moment, but the framework for them to be made at a later date is set out. So the largest recommendations would be to switch from using natural gas to power dryers to electric drying, or just purchase electric dryers instead of natural gas dryers generally. And then a last option would be to, instead of delivering frass as a dry product, to instead sell it simply wet. They do currently do this for some buyers, and it is fully applicable as a wet product, and that would omit the drying process fully. And so that's why wet frass is accepted recommendation at this point. It really just depends on the demand associated with wet frass as compared to dry frass. As for me, myself, and I, lesson that I learned from this experience, I would say the one that struck me the most immediately was the importance in identifying and fully grasping and then continuing to reasonably adhere to the scope and scale of the project. Just in order to avoid any loss of attention or extraneous focus on things that might not necessarily deserve it. So just holding myself accountable to those things was especially important. Also, comparing things is not as cut and dry as it appeared to me initially, especially in a sort of uncontrolled situation like this, where I'm scouring a market and picking out information. It's never going to be an exact one-to-one type situation, but there was still a lot of important pieces of information to glean. So that was super exciting. along with the defining the scope and scale, sort of sticking to that, also setting my own personal expectations for the contributions that I would have, and then being able to communicate those expectations that I had in a professional setting, was a large, I'd say, initial learning curve that ended up being a really valuable, professional, lesson that I took with this. And then also, very sweet and exciting, just the opportunities for sustainable development that were presented to me from my institute pool, but also just being part of this program were very exciting and inspiring. And I had never really heard of, especially not worked with an operation like pools that was very unique and cutting edge and provided a great outlet for people to like express this care for the environment when they might not otherwise have an outlet to express. And I just found that very inspiring. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions for Sage? Online or in person?
I have a question. Is the main drawback to the wet grass, I'm guessing like storage and longevity?
As far as I'm concerned, yeah, and then also the transporting it is a little bit easier when it's on packaged for dry. But again, it also just depends on the needs of the buyer. In some cases, applying it dry is more comfortable than applying it wet.
Well, I'm from garden, so I'm like. Steve, about the soil investment.
Yeah, those two are great.
Awesome. I think I like that maybe the simplest solution is just to not try it, right? Because like sometimes the obvious solution is the right one. Thank you.
Yeah. What was your favorite part? Oh my goodness. Honestly, I mean, a lot of it was so much fun. On Fridays, I got to go into the farm actually and like see all the bugs and also just get to like work with team members that I didn't usually see. There's always some sort of like team like bonding type stuff. Absolutely. So yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, how did you feel about the bugs?
Pretty stoked. I kind of knew going into it that I was going to be really into the bugs, and the first day that I actually got to like see them and like hold them, I was like, yeah, this is totally good. Yeah. It's kind of like when you like hold like a whole like handful of them, you can feel them like all swarming at once.
Oh my gosh.
Which sounds really bad, but it's like a palm full of energy at them. I thought that was a little sweet. Yeah.
So I know that Shapul is one of like the leaders in this, but did you hear about any other sort of organizations that are starting to explore black soldier fly larvae in similar races? Are there going to be competition on this market and maybe a good race to innovate?
Yeah, for sure. They were actually in the research that I was doing to just like understand more about the process and the market and to do comparisons. There were a lot more similar operations than I thought that there would be. So there definitely are. I'd say especially more outside of the US, there are a lot of operations implementing black soldier fly larvae for their digestive or office data. So yeah, super cool situations.
Yeah, so the information that you're providing is now sort of a competitive advantage to say, look, we can offer this to our to the people that might purchase our products as information that may be our competitive. So that's really cool. Nice job.
We have time for one more question. There's a question online. Did Sage do any research on the facility beforehand, or was her assessment based purely on her visits?
Oh, thanks. I guess I was briefly familiar with the facility. Actually, I was doing some research last summer in the Midville area, surveying freshwater mussels in creeks, and there's a creek on the property. And so I'd actually been out to the property the summer before and had gotten a brief tour. That kind of stuck in the back of my mind. And then I heard about this amazing program and recognizing the name cool. Oh my gosh, I've got to get in there. I'll go work it out.
Sorry, y'all.
Yes, I can.
We were trying to be fancy and
We were, and now we.
and that, yeah, coupled everything up. Lots of folks saying great work, excellent project. Like that.
In fact, they try on the, so success rate still, so.
All right, let me see if I can get us back on track here. With seeing the presentation. Yeah.
It'll probably snark it again.
What are you gonna do with your prop? Are you gonna have it up there?
Is it a scanner?
It's all sorts of things.
It's.
And you're just gonna have to wait and see.
Are you?
Oh,
It's gonna be
yes.
so much fun.
Is it a line attack?
Yes. But I wasn't gonna tell everyone until after.
So my bad.
I don't know.
Just gotta hold up your finger.
Okay.
You're
What
gonna
if
have to
all the
wait.
presenters stand by the table, not at that booth, but right here? So that we will have all of this kind of working, capturing. Under TV one. Yeah, but where's the microphone? At this camera, right?
They have the microphones are above the table.
Oh, right here.
Really, the speakers want to be able to see their presentation votes. Is my understanding.
But if you watch.
Right. Thank you, Blaine.
Yeah.
Next time, we have Maria and Ashford.
This slide.
Yeah.
Scanning.
Right, that's why.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marina, and I was at the Ashland Food Co-op this summer, and I'm gonna give you guys an overview of my waste report I made for them. So here's the team. I graduated from U of O with a degree in environmental science this spring, and Chris Burns, my project mentor. He's the sustainability manager for the co-op. And then I also wanted to shout out all the awesome department managers and staff who helped me all throughout the way. So the co-op is Southern Oregon's first certified organic community-owned grocery store. They have over 10,000 member owners. They emphasize local food, quality products. And I really wanted to highlight how surprising it was to me when I got there. Just it's really evident that sustainability evolved with the co-op, and it's super central to their mission. So why was I there in the first place? All kind of ties back to this goal that leadership made over 10 years ago to become zero waste by 2030. And the heart of that decision just ties into the fact that protecting our ecosystem is going to trickle down into protecting our community's well-being and for access to good and healthy food, which is everything that the co-op stands for. So sustainability initiatives also often need a financial incentive as well. And here's a little snapshot of a program that I did some analysis for, saving $10,000, and we'll talk about that more later. What is becoming zero waste even? Because it's kind of a counterintuitive phrase, and I was confused by it at first as well. Doesn't mean that the co-op's not going to throw anything away. The industry standard is that over 90% of your materials are being diverted from the landfill. So whether that's reuse or recycle or prevention. Okay, I'm gonna go through basically what my project entailed. So firstly, quantifying the yearly weight of all the solid waste streams. And that was important for the co-op to be able to assess how close are we to that 90% diversion goal. Providing them waste audit methodology so that they can replicate this in the future and then build off of this methodology to get more precise numbers. Recommending a specific zero waste certification, helping set up some structure to get that rolling. Recommending actions based on the waste audits, interviews, and research I did. And then also providing that narrative of departmental interviews, covering all the current waste practices and the past attempts that the co-op made, because I think an important part of sustainability is like preserving that progress and always moving forward. So I recommended the true zero waste certification. A lot of other food companies use this in the industry as of now. And basically, why is the zero waste certification important in the first place? Why can't we just go along with the practices as you have them? I'm going to go through some reasons why it's beneficial. So the minimum program requirements of the certification will provide structure for the co-op and along in the future to strengthen their waste tracking, providing accountability for their goals,
the credit system that it runs with. There's 81 possible credits you can get, and they're great because it's a more holistic approach to waste systems. Instead of just meeting that minimum diversion threshold, you get credits for making a closed loop system or doing some upstream management. So a bit more diverse look at that. And then certifications do have a cost. But I wanted to quote something my mentor Chris told me, like the co-op wouldn't be getting the certification for themselves, they'd be getting it for other grocery stores and for other businesses to learn from them, see what's possible, introduce that collaboration and communication. And sustainability is not, it's not solved by one person, it's a collective. Staff interviews. So this was really important for me to get my waste audit off the ground and figure out what even is important to measure here. Firstly, I noticed there already exists a strong culture of internal reuse going on. The bottom box with the bananas, that's our staff cleaners bin. So any imperfect food staff can take for free. Anything left over gets donated to the community. Top right food goes to animals. So any inedible food that can't be sold goes to animal feed. So we do the waste hierarchy of people first, then animals, then compost last. The boxes at the top are like any produce boxes that are in good shape, customers can put their groceries in. So lots of cool, creative ways. But incoming, oh wait, it's show up, here we go. Incoming packaging was definitely the most pervasive waste stream across all the departments. And that just calls for a need to reduce packaging at the source. That trash can on the bottom right is from our bulk section. So like all the coffee beans coming in, there's nothing a staff person can do except throw that bag away because it was designed to be thrown away. So how can the co-op increase their diversion when a lot of the stuff they're getting is made to be thrown away? And then product performance and customer preferences sometimes necessitate less sustainable choices. So finding that balance as a business was interesting thing to work about. Okay, audit methodology. So first I defined 16 primary waste streams and their frequency of accumulation, and that let me collect my data. Any estimates I had to report and scale up, and then the schedule was unique for the different contexts of each waste stream. For example, some needed to be measured across weeks rather than just a couple days. And then some interesting prominent challenges were waste streams that were added to and taken from throughout the day on a not a set schedule, like our cleaners bin, the staff imperfect food bin. So figuring out how to find a happy medium that one person could measure a waste stream like that without sticking someone there with a scale at 24 hours of the day was a fun challenge. This is a map of our diversion programs going on as of now. So we have departments on the left, waste streams in the middle, and then where those waste streams are going on the right. Green is food reuse, yellow is solid waste reuse, and then blue is recycling. And this is just an important way for the co-op to go back and look, okay, let's say we want to assign some responsibility for who's going to audit this in the future, or just understanding the system as a whole is a great way to look at it. And it's very complex. These are my waste audit results. So 80% of material is being diverted from the landfill as of now. The target is 90%. The top three, we have cardboard at around 227,000 pounds a year. And then the animal feed, the fodder, and then the landfill at 182,000 pounds. So one of my big recommendations for them was to encourage reusables at the hot bar. I observed customers eating with to-go containers on site quite frequently, and then upon investigating in the trash, there was a substantial amount. And I actually did measure it again. There's 0.25 pounds in the trash, and scaling that up makes about $10,000 worth of to-go container purchases that could have been avoided if the customers had chosen reusables at the hot bar. So some simple action signage would be a really easy one to implement, and then going more to more high impact things, including an in-counter dish dispenser. So reusables are just really in your face when you're getting your food, or redesigning the presentation on the line. And then this program needs to be bragged about. It was started last year by the sustainability department, getting rid of all of the disposable utensils entirely. And so if customers are taking food to go, they're allowed to just take the metal fork, and if you bring it back, you bring it back. But if you don't, it still works out for the co-op. And I was analyzing the program just to prove those numbers, and they saved $10,000 in the year, prevented 87,000 utensils, and saved 1,000 around 1,000 pounds of plastic waste in the year that it's been running. So definitely recommend to continue that program. Use it as a case study to advertise to other businesses and grocery stores, and to maybe expand it to more food items like cooks and things like that. My pollution prevention table kind of just goes over what I've already been talking about, the numbers that will be helpful for the OASIS program to share with the EPA. We have, yeah, the saving some water use I calculated as well. The bring back program can also save 5,000 gallons of water and 1 million tons of CO2. So we'll just see if you can get numbers. And then I have a lot of additional recommendations that didn't go into data as much, but mostly on the observations and interviews and just system analysis that I was doing. So I'll just go through a couple. These are our reusable plastic crates. So over 10 years ago, the co-op bought around hundreds. They don't know the exact number. It's kind of lost to the world now, but basically they gave them to local farms, and they collapse, and you put their produce in them when they ship them to the co-op. And upon investigation, the farms that have been using them have been using them for over 10 years. None of them they rarely break. And so it's kind of just a great investment to keep looking into and seeing if that program can be expanded, because otherwise it'd be using wax, cardboard, or plastic corrugated boxes, which can be recycled, but that's not prevention, and that is at the top of our hierarchy. Purchasing reusable glasses for drinks on site, as the trash audits showed, people do consume their beverages on site. And then another cool thing, there's smaller scale companies that can ship their products with less packaging. So for example, Dave's Killer Bread brings their bread to the co-op with just a reusable pallet, no cardboard box, no film. So auditing suppliers to see if there's any other small scale shipments that can also implement these minimal packaging strategies. Because the really big semis can't really do that. They have to rely on certain packaging structures to make that possible. Some more, I have reduce and recycle nitrile gloves. Gloves weren't always as prominent as they are today, especially after COVID. So just revisiting that policy. Is there anywhere we can allow hand washing as opposed to using gloves 100% of the time? And then tracking water use across the store. And it's exciting because the co-op is going to go into that project. I didn't have enough time to go into it during my internship, but they are in the process. All right, some challenges. At first, the abundance of pre-existing diversion practices made it seem like there were limited options that were like easy to go after. But to me, it revealed two exciting pathways forward for the co-op. One, that quantifying and recording these efforts to encourage permanence and replication. So that's what a zero waste certification will be super helpful for, is just that structure to do something like that. And then two, looking at the bigger ecosystem of the food system, working with suppliers and farms to change the norms around waste, around the way that packaging is so pervasive in our food system. So, you know, going upstream and being collaborative. And that is all. Thank you. And any questions?
First of all, amazing job and great job to the co-op for the actually, like, I feel like I already am getting a lot of inspiration for this, for like stuff that we can do. And I think that it's interesting to observe again that one of those simple solutions there kind of just let people take the forks home and not like worry about it.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if there's any data on people actually bringing
them
The
back.
reusable back versus
Yeah.
like loss.
Well, that was what was interesting about those numbers. So they had to order 87,000 more forks the year that they only bought disposables. So
Right, yes.
they were saving I calculated the percentage, they were saving around 75% of what they used to order.
That's
So if they are bringing it back, because otherwise it would have been the same volume. Yeah, but they do lose forks still, that happens, but it was interesting to see like it still paid off
yeah, that's
in cost and in materials. That's me in the dumpster and then
I like the banana phone.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I like how you really thought about the approach, like the methodology, the philosophy of the program, rather
Yeah.
than targeting just the certification and how we meet it. It's like, what do we want to do? You know, like, how do we want to get there?
Yeah,
That was a good approach, in my opinion, and going to like programmatic solutions. One thing I see a lot of crossover is, so we're a large company and there's a new law called extended producer responsibility. And
Yes.
Oregon is really leading the charge. It's kind of a movement across the US. There's 7 states that are implementing it. And what it does is it puts that responsibility on the producer of the product to target increasing recyclability and then lessening the impact to communities that are managing that waste. And so I could see a lot of opportunity where you could start to engage the supply chain and really
Yeah.
support them in their effort to meet your goals and then improve their bottom line. So it's really
Yeah.
cool. I like that.
I just want to note that Chris, your site supervisor, says we're so thankful for the opportunity to work with Marina this summer. Exclamation points. Such important information that will inform our work in the future. Thank you, Marina. And
thanks, Chris.
Oh.
Staff, we have Rowan who's working with Oregon Potato Company.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Keenan. I am an OASIS intern, working with Oregon Potato Company. I was gonna go over the partnerships, I guess, nobody's really done that yet. OASIS, obviously, Oregon Sea Grant, Environmental Protection Agency, and then the. Cool, so a little bit about me. I'm an current student at Oregon State University. I study mechanical engineering with a focus on thermal fluid sciences. My passions are kind of just being outdoors. I'm into climbing. I like hiking and running, biking, exploring new places and trying new things, and generally making myself kind of uncomfortable in situations, which is why I chose this internship. It's pretty different from what I've ever done. Sustainability is like quite a large field, and I've just pretty much done engineering with a bit of sustainability on the side, but it's always been something that I've wanted to do, and so now I can merge the two together. Okay, so the agenda for today, we'll go over the company, Oregon Potato Company. We'll look at the project overview, some of the goals, and then some of the more technical results that I have. Then we'll go through the lessons learned and a little bit of time for questions if you have thoughts. So Oregon Potato Company is a very large scale food manufacturing company. And it is the parent company for 17 other food manufacturing facilities. And you can see them here on the map. There's a lot in Washington, and there's 4 in Oregon, which I'm going to be looking at, in Idaho, some in Michigan. Here are the 4 that I'm looking at. So first up, we have National Frozen Foods, which is in Albany. They specialize in green beans, green corn, purees, squash, vegetable blending. Then there's Norpac, or Pacific Northwest VeggieCo, which is in Brooks, which is in Salem. They specialize in individually quick frozen or IQF vegetables, so corn, whole corn, fed, snap peas, the list goes on. They also do IQF fruit and berries, and then they simply purees. Willamette Valley Fruit Co. is much smaller. They're in Salem. They only do fruits and berries, IQF. And as well as some puree stock and some co-pack and repack. There's also OPC Boardman, which runs 365 days a year, 24 hours, 4 production lines, and they only make potato flakes and flour. So very, industrial facility. Okay, so for the project description, the incentive for change for this was sort of a need for standardization across the facilities. Each one runs completely differently, under different management basically, so there isn't really incredibly good scaled metrics that you can bring across all 17 manufacturing sites. There's also the vision for industrial symbiosis that Potato Company has, which basically entails looking at all of the resources in and out of each production process and deciding how those waste resources can be reused. So for example, if there is a cooking process for a vegetable, there's some excess heat or steam lost. And how can we see if that steam can be recaptured, used for another step, or be sold to a neighboring facility that can be reused? So that's where the symbiosis comes in. So the approach that I had, I started with the site visits, driving out to these 4 different sites in Oregon, touring them, taking notes, taking photos, talking to plant managers, getting just a good idea of how they work. I've never worked in food processing before, so this is quite a big hurdle to just do the research and understand how these extremely complicated, expensive 100 million gallon facilities work. The next step was the data collection, so talking to plant managers, getting facility diagrams, getting utility information, the cost, the usage, looking at their pounds of product produced per year. The next was the process mapping, where I take all that information and get more specific and look at the steps of each production process. So the intake steps all the way to the packaging steps, which is also quite complicated. Then you take all 3 of those things, look at the opportunity assessments that we can find. So through the site visits and through the process mapping, we can see where the resources can be reused, or there could be improvements within the production line. There's so much going on within these facilities, it's sometimes hard for the plant staff to notice the little things, but with a fresh perspective, it was good. It's a good way to find opportunities, and we'll get into that in a bit. So more specifically about the facilities, National Frozen Foods, they have a linear production line or a more linear production line, basically meaning that when you map it out in the process diagrams, you can see from start to finish and predict where the product is going to end. Whereas at NORPAC, that process changes depending on the crop, depending on how busy they are, and it's kind of up to the plant manager to decide which lines are going to run, and they do not run linearly. The National Frozen Foods also has measurable water costs. An interesting thing about NORPAC is they have a closed loop water system. So they take their water from their freshwater tower. Once it goes through the facility, it's processed in the facility. When it goes out as wastewater, it's treated on site and then sent out to one of their 5 lakes instead of being land applied. Right, it is land applied, but next is Willamette Valley Fruit Co. It's much smaller, simpler. There's only 2 main production lines. It's very efficient and there's very little waste resources. And then OPC Boardman they do starch recovery, which is where they take the water and they pull the starch from the water, and they're able to sell that starch as a resource. There is more starch recovery potential within OPC Boardman, so that's something that we looked at. And they're also tied to the Portamora wastewater facility. Okay, so some of the challenges I found were a limited sustainability connection to the data. So each machine takes information about the resources that they're taking in. So obviously how much power it's using, the flow just for food safety and production efficiency. But that data is not linked to the overall sustainability and the usage of the plant. So it is difficult to understand specifically which processes in the production lines are using the most fuel, power, or water. Next was just the complexity of the facility layouts. Just understanding these massive food production sites and getting a good grasp of how they work. And then the third was just the travel distance going from plant to plant. They're all around Oregon and kind of a bit difficult sometimes it was important to make the trips efficient, and make sure I knew all the information that I needed to collect before I arrived there. And then quickly ask questions to the plant managers afterwards before I forgot the things that I missed. Okay, so we'll go over some specific recommendations in P2 calculations. So some overall recommendations that I'm making are related to water use and measurement. So installing flow meters, I talked about before, the connection to the specific data within the plant is difficult to connect to the larger overall sustainability goals. So installing flow meters for water so we can track in line the water usage. And then implementing reuse piping. So where water could normally be taken to the drain, look at clean water that could be reused and sent back to an earlier step, just to overall use less water. And then tracking starch and product waste. So knowing how much product waste is being lost on the production steps and knowing how much starch potential there is at Boardman. And then energy efficiency and automation. Smart machine logic systems, so shutting down idle lines that are not running product using visual sensors. There's also boiler heat recovery. There's quite a lot of heat in these massive boilers. And being able to recover that heat and reuse it is part of industrial symbiosis and an important resource. And modern chilling and freezing systems, just making sure everything is up to standards. There's also standardization and scaling. So standardized sustainability metrics and scaling them per facility. OPC has sustainability metrics, but being able to scale those depending on the size of facility is an important part. And then partnering with third party or government sustainability programs to raise capital for larger projects. Okay. E2. Oh shoot, didn't show all. Okay, so the first project here, we have solar water collectors, which is basically solar systems that sit on the roof that will preheat the water for the boilers so that the boilers use less fuel. This calculation it's quite an expensive project. So the ROI is not very high, it's 7%, it's hard to tell, and then the payback period is 14 years, which is pretty high. But the CO2 emissions are in the thousands of tons per year, which is massive, and then the fuel use is 176,000 therms per year, which is a lot. So it could be paid for by a third-party government or government sustainability program. Next is idle belt logic. So taking those idle belts that are not running product and stopping them and then resuming them when more product is running. That has a higher ROI and a lower payback period. Also saves energy. And then the third kind of project is just calculated on National Frozen Foods here. That's reuse cooling water piping. So the cooling step after the cooking of the vegetable they're sprayed with water. That water is drained to a tank, which could be reused to an earlier step because that water is still clean. So just being able to pump that water back would save a ton of water per year. So yeah, that's a more technical stuff. So some of the lessons learned was the value of process mapping, being able to look at these massive facilities and break them down into steps and look at their resources in and out was incredibly valuable and important, and like revealed hidden inefficiencies and areas for reuse. Also the importance of good data, having reliable measurements and specific measurements is very important when you're looking at larger sustainability goals. Communication across facility varies. That was something I learned. And then balancing technical and practical solutions. So balancing ROI and practicality to guide effective and realistic solutions for this business, because it is a business at the end of the day. System thinking and long-term vision. So scaling these solutions across all 17 manufacturing sites and making sure it's all makes sense. Yeah, questions?
I noticed on your pink table that you could save like almost 6 million gallons of water, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredibly impressive. Tell us more about those meters and where this water is,
Where the water is coming from?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
this,
based on our conversation. You said install flow meters as one
Yeah.
of your recommendations.
yes, yeah. So the water use, so the water here is it's the water usage for this calculation is just an estimate. But if we installed, it's based on like it's kind of I guess I can go into engineering a little bit. It's based on like, so we have like, so we have a tank of water and I can see that it's overflowing. And I make an estimate on the frequency, how much it's overflowing. And I use a fluid dynamic correlation to calculate the speed of the water, or the flow rate of the water being released from the tank. And then we can just scale that up by how many hours the plant is running, how many lines are running. And if that water was fully being reused, there's like a capturable fraction of water, like based on how much needs to be filtered, which is like 90%. But if that water could be reused, yeah, I mean, per year it would save, 6 million gallons of water, just because there's so much overflow to the drain.
And the reason why there's not the annual savings is because it's coming from a well.
Yes, oh, yes, sorry, you picked up the money, yes, okay, the ROI, in the payback period is NA. For those, because the water is not, they don't track their water for financial reasons. And the water is not technically being paid for, it's just the electricity to pump the water. So that was an important, that's why installing flow meters, is really important, because we don't really know how much water they're using for that.
I'll add a little bit of flavor to that too. So the thing in our business, so these manufacturing facilities are producing hundreds of millions of pounds of finished product annually, for, domestic and international, product lines. And so the challenge is when we look at a project that has potential savings, like the value in that across our footprint for the year, like, does it generate the ROI? Does it make sense on the overall, impact to the facility? And the awesome stuff that Rowan helped us do is set up these tools. So the resource mapping, where we can get granular in the process and not so much at a facility level, but a process level. And then also the tables and how he helped us to evaluate projects related to environmental benefits. So before, we do measure and meter things like water and intensity, energy, but it's more of a facility level. And so what we're lacking is granular data. So when we consider projects, we can get specific to what that process unit of measurement does. And then have some tools that Rowan helped provide to where we can evaluate that specific component, and get more value from that project rather than just production capacity, ROI on return on investment. What are the carbon emission reductions? Does it support safety? Does it support food quality? So Rowan was fantastic. We love having fresh eyes, fresh perspective, but in addition, just super smart and very intuitive of how he approached the project. So it was great.
Yeah, it's definitely like a multi-year long project, but that's it to 11 weeks. I did. So,
We do have a couple of questions from the audience. Do we have time?
sure.
Okay. This one, timely and important work. This is from Sherry Cole. What aspects of this work lend themselves to working pre-competitively with other companies in Boardman versus what OPC should or could or would do alone? Complicated.
I think so specific to Boardman, we don't, well, there's Boardman Foods, which we have a competitive product in onions. But the rest of the industry, we don't directly compete with. And so Rowan mentioned industrial symbiosis, which is a bigger concept where everybody's looking at our waste streams, and the ultimate goal, like let's say the starch is a perfect example. There's byproduct opportunities in both food products and non-food products with starch. And so there's another industry that generates that too. So industrial symbiosis puts attention on that and really asks the question, you know, should a company come in and start to support manufacturing of some product based off that waste stream? So there's a lot of collaboration in Boardman with industry and partnerships, I guess.
Great, so that's what you're. Then maybe one more question from Alita, our EPA contact. How committed was Oregon Potato Company to the long-term goals set for the solar panels? Or are you feeling it?
You know, it's not really something that we've discussed like super in depth, but it's definitely something that I'm hoping that we can kind of bring forward when we like present more of this information to the specific plants. We'll just, I guess, stay in conversation with it. It's kind of like, it was nice to have some technical calculations, but I think the more important work was like creating the tools and the process mapping, programmatic stuff.
And we're willing to share a little bit of that information, because like I for businesses, I'd love to know about that.
Yeah, I mean, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Ron. On the solar project, the ROI is tough. 16 years, it's just tough for a business to make that make sense. But on the sustainability program side, you know, we have goals for 2030, 2040, 2050. And so it requires the conversation, like, do projects like that help us achieve our goals around, you know, carbon reduction, energy reduction? And so then it's a different conversation, like takes it from the factory to the company's, you know, long-term goals.
And generally, the information will be shared. It will be posted on Sea Grant's OASIS webpage. We'll summarize all the summary stories that the interns have been working so hard to wrap up, so it will be available.
We talked a little bit about like third-party programs, government programs that could incentivize some of these reductions, whether it's water or emissions. Do you have a sense for how that ROI would change if there was a crediting program? For example, it's like, what's the magnitude of difference if there was some sort of carrot or stick for making these reductions that you recommend?
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure on the specifics of how those programs are chosen or how the programs choose to do what project. But OPC has had companies like Energy Trust come in and pay for like $100,000 projects or something like that to make their freezers more efficient, or you know, put VFDs on their machines. As far as changing the ROI, I mean, it would definitely change the ROI, because they would be paying either nothing out of pocket or like very little and still see the benefit from it. So yeah, get over.
Rowan, while I'm switching to Abby's presentation, you want to talk a little bit about your continued role that you're gonna stick around for at OPC?
Yeah, so I'm taking a month off in September, and then in October we'll do some presentations and a little bit more work with the company.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to kind of take Rowan's work and present to those sites, and then our leadership team at OPC. And then Rowan mentioned industrial symbiosis, and so we're really focused on that program and working with our partners at the state level, agencies, as well as industry, to, you know, kind of run that out at our multiple locations. And so I think immediately, you know, Rowan's, you know, education program and what he wants to do in life, I think there's an opportunity to kind of, you know, finish populating those mapping tools for all of our factories. So, you know, more to come on that. But first and foremost, having Rowan kind of present to our company kind of what he discovered and, you know, what his ideas are. So looking forward to that.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Abby Williams, you know?
Hi everyone, so my name is Abby and this is my OASIS internship this summer with Ravino. Let's get into it. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Ravino itself, why reuse matters, my 2 different projects that I worked on this summer, some P2 table highlights, as well as final takeaways, acknowledgements, and then references. And then I'm sure there will be time at the end for Q&A. So, hi, my name's Abby. I am an ex-middle school science teacher turned graduate student. I currently study environmental science at OSU with a little emphasis in natural resources. So when I saw Ravino as one of the host businesses for OASIS this summer, I knew, that was something I wanted to be interested in supporting. So a little bit about Ravino itself. Ravino is a sustainability focused startup in Newberg, Oregon. They are designing they have designed a durable standardized glass bottle to create a circular closed loop system all about reuse. So not only have they designed the bottle itself, which I'll show you in a second, but they're also creating this system that supports producers with sanitizing and redistributing those bottles. They do this through label guidance, logistics, and other education. Again, all to reduce that glass waste and carbon emissions made by single-use glass. So when I talk about circular economy and closed loop systems, I want to dive into that a little bit more and define it. The biggest problem right now in wine spaces with carbon emissions is that glass waste. This is a really cool visual I got to help explain and use to educate potential partners with Ravino this summer. It gives a kind of a percentage breakdown of where carbon emissions goes in winery operations and the wine production itself. So you can see at the bottom, about 15% is the winery operation, 34% is the agriculture behind vineyards, 13% to transport, and then 38% is that single-use glass. So with that 38%, only about 38% packaging of the carbon emissions, 30% of it actually ends up getting recycled, which then, the rest goes into landfills or can even get downcycled, which is much more energy intensive. Hence, reusable glass bottles being a reliable solution. You can see in this closed loop system, once that bottle enters what we call the closed loop system, it stays. So it's circular because it's not ending up in those landfills. It's not getting downcycled. It's staying and it's being able to be reused over and over again. When we look at the pollution prevention pyramid or table here, we can see that reuse lands right in the middle between prevention and recycling. So it's really kind of the happy medium, if you will, when it comes to preventing pollution. Which leads me into my first project. So I had the opportunity to have 2 projects this summer. The first one being outreach and reuse expansion, with the goal to expand Ravino's reusable bottle system beyond wineries and even into broader beverage markets. This is a lovely picture of me. I did a lot of outreach, both virtually and in person. This is what my virtual days would look like. At the beginning of the summer, I targeted over 90 beverage manufacturers who I thought would benefit from a reuse system like this across wine, soda, kombucha, spirits, and other sectors, not necessarily to use the standardized glass bottle, but as people who would, or organizations that would benefit from, getting their glass washed and reused and sanitized over and over again. In order to do that, I developed and deployed lots of surveys as well as email campaigns with CRM, which stands for Customer Relations Management Tracking Programs. That's something I had never done before. I didn't even know those things existed. It was really interesting. During the beginning of the summer, I also took a marketing class. So a lot of the marketing things that I was learning, I was applying into what I was doing with this outreach. So my in-person activities, I got to go visit lots of wineries this summer. I know. I did this across the Willamette Valley. I also got to partner with the Bring interns, and we went down to Southern Oregon to do this. Promoted sample kits. So this is a sample kit. Got to put together, folded the cardboard and everything. And this is something that I would use as an educational tool to talk with potential partners. Inside is one of our glass bottles. So this is a Ravino reusable glass bottle. Some special things about it, you can see it has the swirl on the neck right here. So that's something that helps consumers identify, oh, like this bottle can be washed and reused over and over again. No matter what the label is, you'll see that and see that it is a Revino bottle. Additionally, on the bottom, it does say refillable. Now, this is what the bottles say now. We're hoping that Revino's hoping to get this changed to reusable, and that's a whole nother thing that I didn't have time to talk about today, but maybe at the end if we can. Not only does it have the bottle, but it also has some fun flyers and education all about the reuse system itself. I also had the opportunity to represent Revino at industry events, specifically with the Willamette Valley Wineries Association. They did networking events. They had marketing boot camp, which was super fun and really got me engaged in the industry itself and getting to talk about reusable glass. The results were fair and few. I really only identified kind of organizations that would be able to onset for this kind of reuse system. I was not expecting to talk to as many places to be a drop site location rather than being a reuse partner. So with the reuse system itself, we have to partner with hotels, restaurants, and other manufacturers to be drop locations. You have to bring the bottle back somewhere, right? And I ended up talking to a lot of places about being drop locations rather than being reuse partners, which was not something I was expected, but something I enjoyed doing along the way. This also just helped build foundation for statewide expansion in Netherlands itself. I will add another thing that was more of a challenge in person outreach was the fact that it's summertime and that is when people like to go to wineries. That is when they like to be outside. So I understand it is a very busy season for the industry itself, which could have impacted these results. My second big project that I worked on with Revino is chemical research and SOP, so standardized operating procedure development. This was to ensure that the bottle washing is safe, efficient, and environmentally friendly and responsible. So everyone meet the bottle washer. It's currently being housed in Milwaukee and it is not operational. So a lot of the SOPs that I did are mainly based on predictions and like expectations that will be set further in the future once a facility can be found to house the bottle washer itself. I ended up developing 3 different standardized operating procedures for Revino, all about their chemical handling, chemical storage, and monitoring for pH, caustic reuse, as well as wastewater discharge. This required a lot of research. Another challenge I found myself running into is there's not a standardized reuse system established like in the US. This is a very common practice in Europe. There is lots of winery, like they have a standardized bottle that they use over there. It is very common for people to bring them back to places to get washed and reused over and over again. That's just not the norm here, right? And so being able to do that research extensively was quite fun and also a challenge. Which leads me right into my pollution prevention table highlights. I ended up having 4 key recommendations for Revino for the pollution prevention table. The first one at the bottom being promoting reusable glass to partners, which is something that they're already doing. Anytime we can avoid creation of that virgin glass, we are saving on carbon emissions and pollution in general. The other 3 have to do with the bottle washing procedures themselves. So the first one being adding a sedimentation tank to the machine to reclaim that caustic. That's like the soap that like washes and sanitizes the bottles. Excuse me. This is something that is planned to happen. It also is going to help us save water usage with the washing operation itself. Additionally, reducing water rinse is going to be another easy way to save water. Now, the reason I had this recommendation as like purely recommended is because, again, that washing machine is not operational. So this might be something that needs to be tested or trial and error to kind of find out, is it effective to lower the rinse volume? Because ultimately the quality of the bottles is our top priority. Finally, Quat D is one of the chemicals used to sanitize the bottles at the end of the wash process, get rid of any kind of microbial things that might be in there still, right? We don't make sure that they're sanitized and they're clean. So I wanted to eliminate it at first just because it has a high toxicity to aquatic wastewater. and you need a lot of personal protection equipment because it is toxic. That, however, was advised against in internal communications because we need to make sure there's nothing living in the bottles before we get it back. So optimizing that again is going to be something that's going to be trial and error once operations continue. Some final takeaways for this presentation is that circular systems work. It requires a lot of trust and timing and technology. Like I mentioned, this is not a norm in the United States. A lot of people, you drink your wine, you put the bottle in the recycling. If you're lucky, a lot of people don't even do that. So this is going to take a lot of establishment, trust. I found, like I mentioned, I used to be a teacher. I went into this. I have no outside experience working in any other industry besides education. So I found a lot of those teaching skills were transferable, especially when it came to communications and outreach, and organization in general. That was a big takeaway for me because I was working with these projects. I built a lot of confidence in my technical writing and SOPs, specifically the SOPs. I want to bring that up because when I was writing them, it felt like I was writing a lab for middle schoolers, right? So middle schoolers, you got to make sure things are clear and concise. You don't want anyone to get hurt. It's the same idea with SOPs. It's the same idea. We got to make sure we're handling our chemicals correctly. We got to make sure no one gets hurt. We have to be clear and concise, so on and so forth. I want to go over my acknowledgements real quick. Obviously, Sea Grant and the OASIS program for having such an organized internship program I got to be a part of. The Ravino team itself, Adam, Haley, Keenan. My technical advisor, Oliver, he services bottle washers. He's from Germany, so he's over in Europe and here in the US, kind of helping establish reuse systems. He did an awesome job helping me talk through the wash process, there he is right there. Talk through just like what is going to be effective, what is not. He was really big on helping me optimize different types of chemicals or eco-friendly ones in the end. The Willamette Valley Wineries Association for really embracing me and letting me go to these different types of networking events. The Bring interns who I mentioned, I went to Southern Oregon with, which was so fun. All the outreach partners I got to talk to and bug this weekend, or not this weekend, but over the summer on email and talking in person. And then obviously my friends and my partner who listened to me talk about wine bottles also. So there's some quick references I used. And then, does anyone have any questions for me? Yeah.
So did you work with Rubino marketing on like the labeling for the wine? I think about like, I'm not a wine connoisseur, but
Good.
I go to the labeling and the way, the product looks. But when I think of the two bottles, one in recycled and one non, could you brand it with like reduced carbon emissions related to this manufacturing process?
Right. So that's actually something, if you're a winery that partners with us, we like require you to put something on your label. So also in my little box here, you can see I have some sample labels of marketing, as you mentioned, that we can, help other wine producers put this little QR code that if it's scanned, then a consumer or anyone who has a smartphone can pull up information about the reusable bottle and specifically find drop locations to bring it back. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were speaking with potential companies that might use the
Mhm.
reusable bottles,
Yeah.
what did you find were the main barriers to
Ah.
adopting?
Yeah, some of them, they just didn't like the swirl. They said, this doesn't match our aesthetic. And I was like, okay. Another one is that there's like different shapes of bottles used for different wines. And right now, Ravino is this one available right now, Adam?
January, the
January,
clear will be
the
January.
clear one will be available. But other than that, there's like an antique green, which is what you're gonna see a lot of reds in usually.
Yeah.
And so making certain bottles available to certain wineries, that was a big priority. If you only had the green one, but you didn't have the clear one, then they didn't want to partner with us. We also asked that you collect back a certain amount before we come and pick them up, and some people were like, we just don't have the space to do that. And again, it was busy season, so people were just like, we're not interested. Yeah.
I just thought of something I've thought before. So what if you had like a distribution center where you gave out the bottles and then you had kegs of wines from different wineries, so
Yeah.
people just could come there and then refill their bottles.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that could be talked about further.
It's like,
for
wine.
Right. Yeah, kind of like a wine bar,
Yeah.
make it specifically for Rubino.
Right.
Yeah,
That's actually where I started, was Cooper's Hall keg wines.
yeah,
So that was, some of the reuse came out of a winery concept with no single use packaging. But people forget growlers and then they have a dozen of them at their home and then they just recycle them.
right.
So the idea is to make it convenient, bring it back when you can, but the filling process for wine needs to be controlled too. So it's like dialing in quality and all the concerns of cleanliness, so.
Little funnel that you could.
Did you have a question? Yeah.
Is the reusable glass bottle made from recycled glass?
It is made from recycled glass. Yeah, it's manufactured to be reused up to like over 50 times. And it breaks carbon neutral just after 3 uses.
Nice.
So pretty neat stuff. Yeah.
Where are the drop-off locations? Is it mostly wineries, and then is the washing all consolidated to the future wash station, or?
Yeah, great question. So the drop site locations are the wineries that we partner with. If you partner with us, we ask that you also become a drop location. That can also create foot traffic for the wineries themselves and the people, especially if you have a wine membership, you have to go there, pick up your subscription, bring it back, so on and so forth. But there's also lots of drop locations with like hotels and restaurants. Like John's Marketplace is a beverage, I don't know, call it like a beer shop. Essentially that is also a drop location because they sell a lot of Rubino bottles. Anywhere, grocery stores, we're like talking to New Seasons, yeah, to become drop locations because they shelf a lot of the Rubino bottles. So it's easier to see them on the shelf, see any kind of signage there, or have some point of contact at the grocery store itself to talk about bringing it back further. Yeah, and you can find it. There's a nice little map online on the website that has all of the. Yeah.
Can wineries adopt it for like one part of their operation, or is it sort of like when they go, they go all in on all of their?
Right. Yeah.
They
Great
try
question.
it out.
Right. Great question. I'm thinking of one of our partners, Willamette Valley Wine. Yeah, that's their name. They use our bottles, but they also, they supply Costco. They're not going to put a reusable bottle in Costco that's getting shipped out of state. So I know that they use a little bit of both. Maybe Adam can speak a little bit more on that too.
It's a constant chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
Like, where is there volume that we can start picking up? So we encourage our partner wineries to use them for everything, because it's just a one-to-one. If early on we thought like maybe we should try to keep them constrained, but then at the end of the day we thought that's kind of silly because we're just replacing one bottle with another bottle. It's basically the same weight. For some people it's lighter, and it comes with an educational message to learn about reuse in your community, what you can do, learn about recycling, which is once again 30%. It's way better than plastic, but
Yeah.
Like learn what you can do before we can collect them in the future. So an ambassador for the reuse movement in general.
Yeah.
Did you get to visit any of the wineries that are using bottles?
I should have. Now that I think of it, most of my focus was targeting, places that aren't partnered with us. But yeah, something to do in the future. Yes.
Do you guys have an estimate of the bottles that actually make it back?
So the thing is, wine turnover is very slow. Wine has to age in a barrel, and then it gets bottled, and then it ends up on the shelf, and then it gets returned. It might take, other people let wine sit on their shelf for months and years, and so on and so forth. That being said, there are bottles coming back to Rubino now, and even though like the washers aren't up yet, but that's okay. They're still coming back to us. They're going to be washed soon. But it's just really trying to get that down to the number right now.
William Valley Vineyards is a good one, 13%,
Yeah.
which is, we were hoping for 5. the first year. The refillable beer bottle program in Oregon started at 5% for the first 2 years, so well ahead of that. Quaddy North and Southern Oregon's at 25%, so others much worse, but getting winemakers to give us data too, is wrangling cats. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
All right, everyone. So we are a few minutes behind, but that's fine. Why don't we take a quick 5-minute break and we'll meet back here at 11:35. Restrooms again are just through the kitchen to the right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can see it.
I can't think.
You snuck in behind me.
Yeah, that word.
Oh, yeah.
What, it's for your parents, during the summer? Yeah. Yeah, different companies are, yeah, lots of leaders, yeah. Yeah, yeah. We hired them. Started off that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I'm sure we're trying to say, that's pretty, yeah. Yeah, great.
Well, great, thank you so much. Have a great. Okay, don't forget the Symposium. Here's Rose.
Hi everyone, my name is Carlos. I do a little bit of the presentation side next, but I work with Bring, and our focus this summer was really to support them with their food and beverage manufacturer program, and was a lot of big focus on refrigeration solution. So let's look at the project. Cool. So my name is Carlos Lente. I use he him pronouns, and I am an upcoming senior here at Oregon State University. My major is in environmental economics and chemistry, so it's a little bit of everything. And so my focus, like I mentioned earlier, was on refrigeration pollution, but I was also able to support other folks in the brake space, which I was able to help out a little bit with their automotive rethink program. So I will talk about that a little closer later on. So a little bit about Bring itself. So Bring has this rethink program that focuses on partnering with businesses, and focusing to help with pollution prevention, but also with their waste management, and overall energy efficiency, sustainability stuff. And so this is kind of their step-by-step guide that they kind of use to, connect with other businesses and stuff. I unfortunately didn't have as much focus on this, but I still wanted to highlight because this is a lot of great work and this is good stuff that they did. So Bring, they have decades of experience. So they originally started as a recycling plant, and then later moved on to more technical assistance with partnering with the businesses and all that stuff. So they've been in the game of sustainability for a while. I believe it's 1971. Yep. Okay, I got it. Perfect. And so this is kind of like their step guide. They evaluate user green business tracker, to explore and find progress and like new opportunities. They use their knowledge about environmental regulation to kind of provide that support. And lastly, I'm not too knowledgeable about the lean manufacturing principles, but it was another additional layer of support. So yeah, and then one of the other things that is really beneficial when businesses are able to partner with Bring is that they're Bring certification. So on top of an added layer of support, you also get advertisement. I'm like losing my words right now. Advertisement being certified with Bring. And so with this, an awesome thing about this program is that they have layers. So you can businesses can kind of choose the depth of sustainability they want to adopt. Personally, I think this is an amazing thing because, it's not like a shoe fits all, whatever the acronym is. The saying is, but I think it's super helpful because, you can get people get their foot in the door and then later on you can bring in more. So yeah. And so like I mentioned earlier, our biggest focus was on this food beverage manufacturer. Bring was able to get a grant from BPQ to really focus on this outreach for food and beverage manufacturers. So what does that really highlight? These are people or businesses that make food or whatever it may be in-house and then also distribute and sell to others. So like a restaurant that just makes food in-house would not really fall into this category, but like wineries, breweries, kombucha places, all these different other sites. Oregon chocolate, that's so amazing going there. And so this is kind of like their areas of reduction. So it's just kind of just a general look. I'm not gonna go into each one, but the biggest area that we kind of provided support was improvements in housekeeping, but mainly within equipment and technology modifications with refrigeration, which was our biggest focus. So I'm not gonna touch too far deep into refrigeration because my co-intern Raman is amazing and really knowledgeable about this stuff. So I'm just kind of set her up for her presentation. But basically, the biggest thing with refrigeration is the cooling chemical, the refrigerant. Some of it can be extremely. I'm not trying to get really too deep in the weeds, but make a big impact in the greenhouse. So once they leak, they can have a really potent impact up to 4,000 times more than like a typical pound carbon. So it can be huge, especially when you have a big facility and you have multiple refrigeration units going on. I believe it's estimated that like 25% is leak on average. So that's like for big places, this refrigerant and its impact tends to add up. And so that was our biggest focus kind of going into this internship. And a lot of this stuff kind of at the beginning of our internships, we literally, at least for me, I had to like really focus and learn about this stuff, learn about what a refrigerant was, which different types, and then kind of what's going on to make sure that we stay on top of them. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for that side. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I spent a lot of time learning about refrigeration, the technical side, because all I knew when I started this internship was that refrigerator kept my food cold. And so I had to do a lot of learning, a lot of videos, and I think the first 2 weeks was just a lot of learning about all this stuff. And so one of the areas that I learned was also important is yes, those technical side of the refrigerant, and making the switch to a different refrigerant with lesser impact, but also for the units that are currently being used, making sure that they're being kept as efficiently as possible. And so that kind of got into the maintenance section of my internship. So this is kind of like the area that I focused in. And one of the big things that I focused in was gaskets itself. So you might just see them and kind of forget about them, not really see their importance. But after some research, I found out that gaskets can be extremely impactful to the efficiency within refrigeration. Even like a small leak or tear like that can cause over time a significant impact. And so that was one of my big deliverables in this internship was just making sure that I had educational content so that brain could have in their library and then later, share with other food and beverage manufacturers and even other businesses in the future to help them stay more efficient and on top of their, their care. And so here was just, I already mentioned this, I kind of got a little bit of myself, was the gasket maintenance. So I think this slide we actually used in one of our presentations for oh my goodness, it's the Willamette Valley Winery Association. Thanks to Rubino, they were able to get us in the door and be able to give a little presentation. And so one of the biggest things, or the reasons why I kept this first bulletin was just to emphasize that businesses are already doing this kind of work, and it's just making sure that we're staying on top of it and being kind of efficient. I think when we talk to a lot of businesses, they would mention, we look at our gaskets, we clean them, yada yada yada, and it turns out that sooner and short time period between maintenance is like the most efficient way possible. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to emphasize. And then just making sure the gaskets are clean, improve their efficiency, enhance longevity. You can even do like some of this stuff at your own refrigerator to make sure that it stays, working as best as possible. And then help to maintain internal temperature to reduce food loss. So, it's kind of a combination of these multiple things when it comes to maintenance. It's making sure that you're taking care of your equipment, and to make sure that they're staying, efficient as long as possible. Energy efficiency, and then also, making sure that your products or whatever inside the refrigerator stays, cool like you want it to be. And so we partnered with a lot of different businesses, and we went all across Oregon. We went to Portland, we went to the river, Southern Oregon. And so we were able to, meet with a lot of folks. For my specific project, I wanted to focus on drop bear brewing, and provide them like solutions to one area that they had. And so these are just kind of the general steps of what I'm gonna kind of talk about, which is like our general walkthrough, brainstorming recommendations, solutions, and then the calculations, which I will present. So it was really cool to be able to like go to a business, look behind the scenes, look at the refrigeration, and just hear about like all this the great stuff they are already doing. I think one of the biggest things I learned was, sustainability might seem like kind of apart from like a lot of other things, but it can really coincide with, making sure that you're saving money and energy. So I think that's one of the cool things that I learned. And yeah, let me get into a little bit more deeper. So, one of the awesome things that we started with is that Drop Bear had already partnered with Ring, with their food and beverage manufacturers program. And so that was really cool, to already have that kind of trust built, to be able to kind of walk through a little bit and have them explain a little bit more kind of what was going on, which happens to be a barrier, which is weird, trusting a nonprofit just coming to your space. And so we kind of learned a little bit about their 2 walk-in freezers, their cabinet chillers, their 2-door reach-in, and then 3-door reach-in freezer, which is going to be the highlight of this internship specifically. And so an awesome thing is that David in this operation was already doing a lot of the maintenance recommendations that I had originally learned about and was willing to like connect with other businesses about. So that was, a good and bad thing. Not so great because I was able to provide that recommendation, but a good thing because he was actually able to support us with a different project that I was playing a little bit too. And one of the biggest things when we did our site visit was he had a reach-in freezer, it was 3 doors. It was in a shed, and the shed was extremely hot. So I think that was one of the biggest areas that we wanted to make sure that we provide recommendations for. It is the biggest focus for my project right now. And so because he had already done a lot of this experience with, his maintenance, his gas kits, and even installed other things to make sure that his equipment would work efficiently, we actually were thinking about partnering to make a good deal. So I'll explain that a little bit more. So the biggest emphasis, like I mentioned, was the freezer. So I'm just going to talk a little bit what did that look like. So this is the location for Drop Bear Brewing. On their backside, where that star is, that was where the shed, where that reach-in freezer was. So because I wasn't able to provide a lot more other recommendations for a lot of areas, this is kind of was the biggest focus. And so this is kind of a little chart explaining kind of what was going on, what was causing the shed to be so hot. And the biggest thing is it had a metal roof. So that metal roof really made sure that it heated up the air on the inside. There's that tree you can kind of see at the top, which kind of had some shading. But it turned out like afternoon, it had like straight direct sunlight for the rest of the day. So that was just making sure that shed was staying super, super hot. And so the heat would kind of from the shed would go, the roof would go into the regular ambient temperature. The reach-in freezer itself would also expel some heat. So just in general, it was just really hot. When we first went in, David had a box fan pointed at just a little, what do I call it? A vent, thank you. I was like losing my words. A little vent to try to expel some of that air. But obviously when we went in for the first time, it was still really, really toasty. And so we started to take some data. And this is kind of what the data looked like. The blue markers are the temperature within the shed, and then the orangey color was the outside temperature within the CPG. I just want to give a big shout out to Robin because she was able to collect a lot of this data. and really make sure that it was usable. And so that was really amazing. I had never used a data logger before, but I learned how to like where to apply it and kind of hopefully in the future kind of use it in other projects like that. So I just want to give a big shout out to Robin for that. So basically it was really hot. At some points the shed got to 107 degrees, and obviously that can't be good for the efficiency of the freezer. And it didn't get any lower than 74 on 12 degrees Fahrenheit. So even at night when there's no sunlight, it was still quite freezing. And so that kind of led us into kind of thinking about what were some recommendations that we could do, what were some things that were affordable and not so affordable. The biggest focus is, we knew that the heat in general wasn't helpful for the reach-in freezer. I'm later going to talk about how impactful that was to that reach-in and how much energy was actually using. And so some of the recommendations that we did was reflective paint. This is something that I was thinking about earlier. Thanks to Beth, I was able to reach out to Bearda, which is a really great company. One of the biggest reasons why we kind of focus on this company specifically, which because it had low VOCs. A lot of paints had high VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds. So things that aren't that great for the environment. And so that was one of the reasons why we focused on Bearda itself. I wouldn't say it was the most cost efficient as possible. It's kind of in the range in the middle of the market. But the biggest emphasis, it wasn't a drawback from the low VOCs. It had an easy application. One of the things with this paint specifically, it had to be brush applied rather than spray. Its physical properties allowed it to be reflective. And so I feel like I'm getting lost in the weeds a little bit, but yes, it was great. Another thing that we were thinking about is an attic ceiling fan. Beth was able to provide similar recommendations to other businesses in the past. So I kind of applied that here to see kind of how efficient that was and kind of what were the savings if we applied. Another recommendation was just simply removing the freezer from the shed. It was mentioned earlier that the most obvious easy answer might be the best recommendation. One of the barriers for this recommendation specifically was that the shed was built around the freezer, so the freezer wasn't able to be readily taken out of the shed without taking a wall or making not a big demolition, but a demolition to the shed. So that was one of the barriers. So those were the first three recommendations for reducing the ambient temperature and removing that freezer out of that really hot space. We also provided other recommendations to overall efficiency, and then going back to that to those refrigerants that have a big impact on the environment. So one of the recommendations, thanks to Robin, again, she's so awesome, she's super smart, was the recent freezer to give it an EC motor upgrade. So basically it's electrically commutated motor that is just generally more efficient than the motors for its compression, for the compression fan that you can already find within a lot of these recent freezers. And so it is estimated to be 70% energy efficient. So that can go a really long way compared to the shaded pole motors, which is the motor that's already found within these freezers. And we felt pretty comfortable giving this recommendation just because David had already given a lot of his refrigeration unit services in the past. So it wouldn't be it would be far-fetched for him to learn a few skills and stuff to be able to apply it himself. And so that was one of the things. I just have to say, one of the biggest challenges with this this specific recommendation was finding metrics for the motor itself. So these recommendations were estimated from other motors. Yeah. And so my last recommendation was switching to a lower GWP, which is global warming potential, which is essentially that unit for how impactful these refrigerants can be on the environment. And so one of the great recommendations that we were able to give was just switching to propane. It had the impact of 3 GWP of 3 compared to its 404A had like 3,000 something. I don't remember the exact units, but it was just really high. It was extremely impactful if it was able to meet. And so that was one of the recommendations. And later with some research, I found that propane actually is more efficient compared to the previous refrigerant inside the freezer. And so we were able to collect this data from its tags specifically. Anytime we went to businesses, this is like the biggest thing that we focused on was making sure we took those pictures of these tags so we can get that data. So again, Robin took this picture, so shout out to her. It's really great. And so that's kind of the additional recommendations. I kind of already gone a little bit into the barriers, but the biggest thing was funding. You know, a lot of these recommendations were just kind of costly. It was tough to provide, you know, hey, maybe get a new freezer with a different refrigerator, but you know, it's kind of expensive. I already talked about like kind of established trust. It was really helpful to get into the door with Drug Bear. And then just time and people power, a resource that, you know, any medium to small business will have. So I'm gonna switch over here kind of quickly. So like I mentioned earlier, we were able to do a video series for Brain to just kind of talk about how can businesses do their own maintenance and stuff. So here we can kind of see the gasket that David was talking about, and then the automated door closer, which can be extremely helpful for businesses to have that. I'm gonna skip over this calculation part and then just gonna quickly talk about the recommendations and annual savings. So if you move in that freezer, you will save up to like $3,000. Also you can highlight if you get a new reach-in freezer with the propane refrigerant, you're estimated to save about $1,000, about $1,200 annually. So this were just kind of like the general metrics, and I can get a little deeper into the carbon emissions, but I feel like I'm a little tight with time. So I'm gonna skip over this rethink automotive part. That was just highlighting I was able to support other areas for Frank. And just a special thanks to all the people here, Beth, David, Spencer, Sonia, and the rest of the team, and then obviously Robin. So yeah, thank you so much. Any questions?
Let's do one question, since you're running a little late.
Yeah, we've got a question in the chat from Michelle. How do you find and inspect gaskets? Is it visually or using refrigerant or an ultrasonic detector? And do you have to follow the entire conduit and piping to find the defective gaskets?
So the gaskets were the biggest focus around the door. And so a lot of them it can just be done visually. You know, like a lot of businesses, they would do their maintenance, you know, they would clean inside and kind of stuff, and just the added, you know, a warm drag. It doesn't even have to have soap on it, just wipe it down through. And another helpful thing is we can, if visually isn't always the best way to look at those, because we can't really tell the age sometimes, other than obviously the, you know, cracking and discoloration and like ripping. We actually would use a heat gun to be able to see how much cool air was able to actually. Beth has that heat gun back of the room, so if you guys want to see, we just put it around the door and to see if, you know, cold air was just kind of cool. So yeah.
Carlos has his email listed right there, so if you have any additional questions, please reach out, or we'll all be around at lunch to adjourn. Alright, so we're gonna make a little switch. We're gonna have Gillian go next from Worthy Garden. And then we'll have Robin
Yeah, sorry, Robin.
Save the best for last.
Clearly.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Gillian Rutten, and I had the lovely opportunity to work at the Working Garden Summit, and I'm really excited to share what I did. Little table of contents. I'm going to talk about myself, the garden,
and then go right into my first project. My main project was looking at greenhouse heating efficiency. And this was where the bulk of my recommendations were made, so I'll show my P2 table there and go over that. And then I'll talk a little bit about my secondary project, which was expanding effluent water use throughout the garden. So I'll tell you kind of what that means, things that I did in that project, and next steps for the garden as well. And then we'll wrap it up with thank yous. I'll have some time for some questions. So this is me. This is me in the greenhouse at the garden, saying I love the garden because I do. It's a lovely place. You can all visit. I'm a recent graduate of Lewis and Clark College, and I have my bachelor's in math and a minor in earth system science. I'm super passionate about combining math and sustainability. I think there are so many opportunities for math to be used in resource management and sustainability work. So I was incredibly lucky to have this opportunity this summer to just jump right into that. And I'm a huge garden lover. So again, being at the garden was absolutely amazing for me and it's so much fun. So let's talk a little bit about the garden. There's some very lovely, beautiful pictures of it. They are a nonprofit botanical garden located in Silverton, Oregon. So if you're in the Oregon area, visit, please do. And they're celebrating their 25th anniversary next July. They are really community focused. They have over 170 volunteers from Silverton and the surrounding areas, and they do everything from like office work to helping out in the greenhouses and planting things throughout the garden. So they're great. They love the community and volunteers. And the garden was founded in partnership with the city of Silverton and their wastewater treatment plant to cool the effluent water. And in turn, they get to use that water for irrigation and in the amazing water garden is pictured there. Beautiful little water feature they have. They also operate 3 greenhouses, which provide plants for the garden and the resource city. So let's talk about my first project. I want to give a little overview of the current greenhouse operations. They operate mostly electric heaters. That's their main heating source. They're 17 years old, so they're definitely aging. And they only meet about 50% of the heating needs. So in order to supplement this, they use propane heaters during the winter months as well, using about 20 gallons of propane on average. They also use benchtop heating in their propagation house, which is powered using an electric water heater. That picture on the bottom gives an example of what benchtop heating looks like. Essentially, there's just hot water in those little tubes, and any plants that are placed on top get the heat from that water. They get root zone heating, which is super efficient. So awesome that the garden is doing that, but there is room for improvement there. The goals for this project were, first of all, to meet the heating needs of the greenhouses. 50% is not what we want to be at. We want to be at 100, and potentially reduce energy use as well. So my roles in this project were, first of all, to identify inefficiencies in greenhouse heating. I researched some cost-effective P2 recommendations. Cost was a really big factor since the greenhouse, or since the garden is a nonprofit. They don't have as much funds to implement these big projects. And finally, I synthesized my research so that it was understandable by the garden staff, the horticulturalists, and the board members at the Oregon Garden as well. So here were my recommendations. First of all, installing new heaters would be awesome. I looked at electric and propane heaters, both of which would finally meet the heating needs of the greenhouses. Installing smart thermostats with these as well would help to cut costs, reduce energy use, and reduce labor as well. My second recommendation was insulating the propagation house with horticultural bubble wrap. I also looked at 2 options here. So I looked at solar wrap, which is more expensive, but it's UV treated, so it lasts a lot longer. And I looked at ACF twin wall bubble wrap, which is very cost effective, but not UV treated, so it degrades fast. This recommendation leads to a direct source reduction of CO2. You know, if you have your house and it's super insulated, you're using less energy to heat it and keep it up to the heating needs. And the great thing about bubble wrap is it's really easy to install. You can just use PVC clamps to hook it up to those beams that you see there on the greenhouse, and you can store it in the summer so that you don't have that additional heat trap in the summer. My final recommendation, which I was really excited about, was constructing a compost hot water heater. This is also a direct source reduction of CO2 since it would supplement the heat created by the electric water heater to power the benchtop heating system. This would also be a really good way for the garden to use their green waste. They have a lot of compost, being a garden, so I was hoping to find strategies to use resources they already have. And this project is completely do-it-yourselfable, so it'd be really cost effective, and it could be like a fun community day. All the volunteers get together and construct this huge compost pile. Here is my lovely huge P2 table. It's kind of crazy, so I'll break it down for you guys. The first two rows are looking at my heater recommendations. You'll notice in the electric heaters row, there are negative signs in annual savings and annual CO2 reductions. And that's because if we were to heat those greenhouses to the amount that they need, we'd be spending more money and emitting more CO2 to actually meet those needs. On the other hand, the propane powered heaters do lead to annual savings and annual reductions in CO2. And that's something that I was really surprised to learn. The propane heaters that I was researching were 93% efficient, so super efficient. And with those heaters, per unit of heat, they cost less money and emit less CO2 than electricity provided by PV. So I was really surprised to learn that. And then the next four rows are kind of like a choose your own adventure situation. They communicate all the different ways that you could mix and match the horticultural bubble wrap and the different heaters. The garden is pretty uncertain about if they want to go with electric or propane heaters. So I kind of wanted to give all the options. As you can tell, the solar wrap is a lot more expensive than the ACF twin wall up front. But it does lead to greater annual savings and greater CO2 emission reductions. And on my final little row down there, we have the calculations for constructing a compost hot water heater. Really low upfront costs that could go down even more if materials were donated, like hay bales and chicken wire and everything needed to construct the heater. And annual savings are pretty huge, leading to a return on investment of like less than a year. So it's a pretty good option for the garden. Okay, while I still have time, I want to talk about my secondary project, which was effluent water use in the garden. A little bit about effluent water to begin with. So the wastewater treatment plant in Silverton treats all of the wastewater that comes into them. And they pump it up to the Oregon Garden during April through October. And the Oregon Garden has these really beautiful wetlands that the water flows through and cools down before it's released to Brush Creek, which is a local in Silverton. And before that water is released, the garden gets to capture it and use it for irrigation and in the Amazing Water Garden, as I mentioned earlier. So the goals for this project were to investigate the use of effluent water to irrigate the greenhouse plants and also to use it in more water features. My roles here were to, first of all, evaluate the safety of effluent water. One of the main concerns of using effluent water in the water features was a potential for like human and animal ingestion, so I wanted to make sure it was safe for that. And algae risk as well. The garden didn't want to have to spend a lot of time and chemicals and energy to clean up additional algae in their water features. So in order to do that, I performed my own water tests. I got a bunch of data from the wastewater treatment plant and I analyzed all of that data as well. So we'll talk about how I collected my water data. This is me collecting data from the Amazing Water Garden. I had lots of days where I was just out there with my jugs of water, collecting water. It was so much fun. I did not fall in, so I proud myself for that. I want to talk a bit about the historic tests that I got from the wastewater treatment plant. They test at 3 locations along the wetlands, and they test for pH, temperature, ammonia nitrate, and dissolved oxygen. I really focused on pH and ammonium nitrate. Those were the ones that were most important for our safety concerns. And additionally, before releasing the water from the treatment plant, they test for all those things, as well as E. coli, which I looked at, and a lot of other stuff, which I'm concerned with. So they provided me with 3 years of tests, so I was able to get a really comprehensive idea of what those levels look like. And we also conducted a bunch of DIY tests. We did those tests over 4 days. Those were done by myself, some of the Oregon Garden staff, and some of our lovely volunteers. So that was really fun. We had this group of students come in and help us do those tests. So that was a great community building exercise. And we tested the water in the wetlands and at the Amazing Water Garden. We tested these for pH, nitrite, ammonia, phosphate, and chloroform like E. coli. And here are my results. There were so many graphs and figures and spreadsheets, but I decided to just condense them all into this one table so it's easier to look at. So I was looking at safe water quality for humans and animals, and all of the levels looked really good. The one caveat being that the E. coli levels were not 0, which is drinking water regulations. Obviously, we don't want to be ingesting E. coli, but swimming water regulations are less than 126 organisms per 100 years, and they were well within that range. In terms of algae risk, the only worrying number was phosphorus levels were pretty high. And then in terms of plant health, we only really cared about pH. Nitrates, ammonia, and phosphorus are all pretty good for plants as long as they're within safe quantities, and everything I tested for was pretty low. So everything was good for plant health as well. So I'll talk a little bit about my next steps with this project. Obviously, I think more tests is better. We would love to get a comprehensive idea of like longer term trends in water quality at the garden. In terms of using effluent water in the greenhouses, I would say the project looks really promising. My one comment being to maintain proper pH levels. The tests that I did were a little bit high, and pH was really important for like soil acidity. Like plants really care about the acidity of their soil, so that's a bit of a worry, but could totally get fixed by the garden. Another thing that I would recommend is to test regularly for total suspended solids. One of the concerns at the greenhouses was that the effluent water would clog the irrigation system that they have down there. So the wastewater treatment plant could test for suspended solids of the effluent water. And the last step would be to plan pipes for the greenhouses. I initially wanted to do this, but I did run out of time. So that is a lovely project for someone else, but definitely looks promising to use effluent water in the greenhouses. For use in the water features, I would say a little bit less promising. One of my main recommendations for the garden is to research regulations more thoroughly. I was having trouble finding strict regulations about this because it's kind of a unique situation. So I would say research more regulations. The phosphorus levels were a bit high, so maintaining those. Getting regular E. coli tests from the wastewater treatment plant just to keep track of those levels. And of course, regular testing is always great. So that is all I have for you guys. This is me mucking out one of the water features. So I got to get in the water a lot. Here's my contact info, and I'll just open it up to any questions. See that. Yeah, Robin.
If you end up using the treated wastewater and they have some kind of critical event where they end up discharging water that's not treated very well, is there a way to divert it away from the greenhouse, or what would be the effects of high phosphorus nitrate pH water being used?
That is a great question. So since the effluent water is only available for certain months, we do have to make sure that potable water is for use during the winter months when it's not available. So we would ensure that it'd be a pretty quick switch around. But the wastewater treatment plant does have to do all of their tests before they release the water. So that's a pretty low possibility of that happening. But in case it does, the garden would have steps to make sure that doesn't. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I noticed heat pumps weren't on there. Is that because there's no options for like greenhouse use or outdoor use, or was that the electric?
I was not exploring those options because the electric heaters that I was looking at and the propane heaters were a little more efficient just for the size of the greenhouses. They're pretty small. So looking at smaller scale heaters and also cost was a big factor. So looking at things that were cheaper to install.
All right, I think we're good. Brandon, do you mind holding your question
Yeah,
for
yeah.
lunch? Is that okay? Thanks. Okay. Thank you. All right, last but not least, Robin. Good morning. First, we set you up.
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Robin. I'm one of the two interns with Bring's Brief Business. A little background about me. I started my career in the Navy, where I worked in nuclear power on submarines. From there, I worked with a number of large public organizations, including the University of Hawaii, the County of Walla Walla, and in Oregon, the Springfield Public Schools on their facility systems, capital projects, and maintenance. And then I went to University of Oregon, where I'm a student right now, and I'm a student in Master's in Public Administration and Master's in Nonprofit Management. So this summer I sought out an internship where I had a chance to work with some environmental issues because it's really important. And I was super lucky that Bring wanted me and brought me in to work on some of their refrigeration projects. So a little bit about Bring. Carlos did an awesome job in talking about their Rethink Business program. So I'll instead talk a little bit about the Bring store. So Bring did start in 1971. The acronym Bring stands for Begin Recycling to Neighborhood Groups. So 1971 was the first Earth Day, and they did this as to propel these neighborhoods to start getting together and recycling before the major trash collectors were doing it as a program. So they would collect their materials together and find ways to recycle in these neighborhood groups. From there, they expanded into the Bring store, which I want to talk a little bit about. They collect materials, whether it's construction materials that were surplus, furniture, any kind of material that can be used again, and they'll provide it for sale to people that come to the store, so that doesn't re-enter the waste stream, it gets reused again in some amazing way. So things like doors, furniture, wood, all sorts of great things, maybe bricks, hopefully soon. So what I did for my internship is I was providing technical assistance to food and beverage manufacturers about their refrigeration efficiency. We heard a little bit about that from Carlos, so I'm going to try and talk about different things so you're not hearing the same thing over and over. But just quickly touching on, we did site walkthroughs, which were awesome. We got to go through, talk with these businesses about how they use refrigeration in their processes, struggles that they're going through with their equipment, and then looking at the equipment itself so that we can analyze how maintenance is being done and if the equipment they're using is the most efficient option for what they're doing. From there, we go back and we take that data and we put it into a really detailed recommendation that talks about maintenance practices that would be good for them to implement, equipment that might be more efficient for them to adopt, and any other things that we would note that would really help the efficiency of their systems. And the last part of this is providing educational materials for Bring to continue using. So Carlos talked about the interview he did at Drop Bear Brewing. I got a chance to do a couple with some refrigeration experts over Zoom that we got to record. And I gave a basic refrigeration maintenance class to local Eugene people at the Bring site. So that was a really awesome opportunity. It's important to talk about refrigerant impacts. Carlos touched on it a little bit, but I want to go a little deeper. It's nice that we both got to talk about a similar project, so I get to go into the background a little bit and talk about why this is so important. So refrigerants, synthetic refrigerants are generally in one of three categories, CFC, chlorofluorocarbons, HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, and HFOs, which are hydrofluoroolefins. And funny names, and they're chemical substances that don't really naturally exist. So they're made in the lab through complex chemical processes. A lot of times they are proprietary, so you don't actually know what carbon impact those processes has. There's also transportation, a bunch of things go into it, but they're all synthetics. And there's a classification called natural refrigerants. Now, it's not natural as in like you're gonna go and take a scoop of stream water and use that as a refrigerant, but it's natural in that there are elements that exist naturally on Earth. So they may have to be refined or purified so that they don't contain other elements in them, but they are not chemically made in a lab. And we have some idea about their composition and how they're produced. And then some really specific properties that are really important when you're talking about these. We've got ODP, which is ozone depletion potential. In the 1980s, when we were using CFCs, that was a big deal. You probably saw it in the late 80s and early 90s. If you were around then, some discussion about holes in the ozone layer. So these CFCs that were released through normal refrigeration maintenance and leaks were chemically binding to ozone in the atmosphere and creating these pockets of lower amounts of ozone that would allow higher levels of radiation from the sun down to the earth. It was a big problem, and most countries around the globe signed the Montreal Protocol and the Paris Accord, which banned their production and use. It was an amazing global cooperation that was extremely successful, and the ozone layer has really almost completely restored itself to the point where we don't hear about that. But their replacement for those were HFCs, and the big problem with that is they have high global warming potential. So when you hear on the news about cars producing CO2 and that being a greenhouse gas, a lot of refrigerants are way, way worse per pound that's released. So Carlos talked about R404 alpha. That one has a global warming potential of 3,922, which means that 1 pound of that is released, it is equivalent to 3,922 pounds of CO2. I'll talk a little bit about a specific piece of machinery that we're recommending a replacement of their refrigerant and that impact, but it's really important to understand what global warming potential is. And then other factors, and this applies specifically to natural refrigerants, a little bit to others, but some are flammable like propane, some are toxic like ammonia, and the operating temperatures make some difficult like CO2. So each of those has its own niche that you really have to understand how it's going to operate to make sure that when you implement it, even though it's got the lower global warming potential, that it's in an application that makes sense for its use. So why is global warming potential important? So I want to talk a little bit about what global warming is and the greenhouse effect. As the sun's rays come towards the earth, one of a few things can happen. It can pass through the atmosphere and be absorbed by the earth. This is the vast majority of what happens. It can also be reflected off the atmosphere and return into space. It can be absorbed by gases in the atmosphere and then re-emitted in a random direction. So it might be back out to space, it might be down to earth. It can be refracted, which is pretty much the same thing as absorption, where the direction changes a little bit, but it still ends up down on the surface where it's absorbed. And at the same time this is happening, the earth is actually emitting heat outward in the form of oh boy. That's okay. I'm just gonna keep going. The difference is these wavelengths that they emit are based on their temperature. So the sun is really hot and it's got a small wavelength that easily passes through the atmosphere. The earth is a lot colder than the sun, and so the infrared radiation that it's producing can be readily absorbed by a lot of these greenhouse gases. When it's absorbed by them, it gets re-emitted out in a random direction, and a lot ends up back on the earth. So the difference between what's coming in from the sun and what's able to leave the earth through the atmosphere, when the sun is greater and that isn't equaling out, we slowly warm up. And over a long period of time, you can see a global temperature rise, which we have currently, it's at least 1.1 degrees Celsius. There's some pretty catastrophic impacts of going over 2 degrees Celsius. So the global community has really set that as a goal to make sure that our efforts keep us below that 2 degrees Celsius. So what can we do about it? Next generation refrigerants, HFOs, are a synthetic version that has lower global warming potential than the HFCs that we're using now. They still are synthetic, so there's not a lot of information about how they're produced and some of the impacts on that side of it. But they're becoming available now. So Congress in 2020 passed the AIM Act, which is starting to restrict the production of HFCs, which are really common in most residential and commercial appliances. Starting at the beginning of this year, we can no longer produce or import equipment that uses HFCs, but it can still be sold if it's on the shelves. At the end of this year, it's not even going to be able to be sold anymore. So if you see new equipment that's not designed to just repair a system that already exists, it's all going to be based off these HFOs and natural refrigerants. And then natural refrigerants, which I talked about a little bit, primarily CO2, propane, and ammonia, are also available in some applications. But as we talked about, with propane being flammable, ammonia being toxic, and CO2 having certain restrictions on the temperatures it operates, they're still designing these in a way that can be easily adapted in residential applications. So it's a lot less common to see them in residential applications, but they're starting to really pop up in a lot of commercial where they have specific uses. So I want to talk a little bit about the recommendations that I gave to Viking Brewing, which was the brewery that I'm going to focus on for this. So one is that we suggested that they update their walk-in cooler. This included EC motors, which Carlos talked a little bit about, and I won't talk a whole lot about. And then replacing gaskets. Again, I probably won't go in that in depth, but what I do have here, and hopefully, I don't know where cameras are, if you can see, but this is a picture of their walk-in fridge door using this thermal camera. So what it's doing is it's tracking the temperature difference between different surface layers. And you can see the blue around the corner is corresponding to about a 60-degree Fahrenheit temperature, whereas our highest temperatures we're recording are at 92.9 around the edges, and a center being somewhere around about 75, 80. So there's a big difference between just the wall of a fridge and the gasket that's letting out the cool air. And that's what these devices can detect. You can use them in a lot of other applications too, anywhere where you're trying to find where there's leaks between hot systems and cold systems. It can be a great just general area identifier. It's an amazing tool that all the tools I'm going to be holding up and talking about were purchased by the OASIS team as part of an EPA grant with help from DEQ. So thank you to all those organizations. And then also from Bring that helped with the purchase of a couple other ones that we use. So all of these organizations, amazing shout out. Thank you so much. One thing better though than just updating is replacing. So as your refrigeration equipment ages, it's going to start working a lot less efficiently. You can see these are two very old pieces of equipment that are connected together. So on the top left, you have a compressor, a condenser with fan, and an expansion valve that are the kind of main components of a refrigeration cycle. And they attach in with the evaporator coils, which are in the bottom right, that produce the cold air. So that's where the refrigerant is going to in the system. As they get old, bearings wear down, motors wear down, insulation degrades. These systems can get really inefficient. At the end, when I bring up my P2 table, I'll talk about the specific savings associated with that. But the replacement of the walk-in cooler would kind of be the next step up recommendation. It tends to be a lot more expensive, so the ROI is a lot harder. And right now, our food and beverage manufacturing partners are seeing really steep increases in food costs. And that's causing difficulty with their capital expenses. Another recommendation I have is for their glycol chillers. So a lot like what Carlos talked about, they keep this in a shed outside that's unconditioned. So there's a big difference between the temperature outside in ambient air and the temperature inside during the summer when the sun's rays are really the most powerful. The green at the bottom shows the temperature difference between the ambient temperature and the temperature in the shed. And that averages out to about 19.4 degrees difference. That's a 20-degree difference between just the ambient air and the air in the shed. So one of the things that we looked at with research was how much does that really impact refrigeration efficiency? And it looks like at about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, it's got a fairly linear relationship. So we can say that about 1 degree Fahrenheit is about 2.5% power difference. So by going up 20, if you went up 10 degrees, so about half that distance, it would be an extra 25% power. At 20 degrees, you're looking at almost 50% power increase for the refrigeration. This can be, this data we collected with one of these. So this is the temperature logger. You can turn it on and leave it in a space and it will report temperature at a given interval for as long as it has battery and tab. So for this one, we tracked it for a week. We looked at temperatures ranging from highs in the 90s down to highs in the upper 80s. So a little bit of a span of summer temperatures to see the differences there. And then another option for tracking how these are operating are one of these. So this is a current data logger. What you can do is you take a clamp, and it comes with the second one as well. And this clamps onto the cables that provide power to your device. And it will read the current that's running through them. So as electricity passes through wires, it generates magnetic fields. This device here can read that magnetic field and estimate the amount of current going through it. And then this will keep track of current every, I think we set it to 6 seconds. So checking how much current is flowing through a wire every 6 seconds, and then plotting that out to see how much energy is actually used by it. Another amazing device. Thank you, OASIS and DEQ and EPA. Thank you very much. I don't have the graphs for that, so we were only able to get it installed during this last week, and we just pulled the data. So we are going to be able to provide that great data to the organization. But sadly, it is not in this. So my P2 table for my recommendations, in total, I had 6 recommendations. Replacing motors with EC motors and replacing the gaskets for that cooler were kind of option 1 in that, and looking at how much savings that can provide. You'll see a lot of these metric tons of CO2 are probably smaller than some of these large production companies. The goal of the Bring outreach is to reach out to a lot of food and beverage manufacturers. So if we can make smaller impacts with a larger group of people, it can still come out to be really, really big. So the biggest one is looking at switching the glycol chiller to a less toxic refrigerant. I mentioned I was going to talk about that a little more. So this glycol chiller used R404 alpha, which we've talked about a few times. That's about 3,922 times more potent than CO2. This one had 25 pounds of R404. The EPA estimates that food and beverage refrigeration equipment leaks about 25% of that every year on average. If it leaked 25%, that's about 6.25 pounds of R404. By switching that to a less potent refrigerant, in this case, I suggest your R448 because it can be switched without changing any of the components of the refrigeration machinery. You would save about 8.2 metric tons of CO2 each year based on that 25% leak estimate. But if you look at the R404 alone, 25 pounds of that, if there was a catastrophic leak where all the refrigerant leaked out, that would equal about 49 tons of CO2. That's equivalent to if your daily commuter car, if you're the average person running for about 10 years. It's a really big impact, and this is one small food and beverage manufacturer. So if we can bring the importance of switching refrigerants to less toxic and less high GWP refrigerants, it's going to make a really big impact. The challenge there is that there isn't really return. So the money that they're investing in switching to these less toxic refrigerants isn't going to save electricity largely. There might be small savings if it's a more efficient refrigerant. But it's not going to save electricity. It's not going to make their processes work better. It's just going to be better for these cases where there's leaks, and the EPA has estimated that's happening a lot. So any questions for me?
don't know if you know anything about this, but I just can't help but wonder if communities like cities have looked at creating like refrigeration hubs or something that are high efficiency so that multiple businesses could access and
The hard part with that is transporting that cold, liquid. Some places have done things like that. If you look at a city like Toronto and they're downtown, they actually do have a chilled water network that you can subscribe to. They'll bring you, the chilled water was piped in through, underground and they're in the densest parts of Toronto. And they have a meter that tracks how much you use and will bill you based on that use. It can be really difficult and costly to set up. And then if it's maintained by a municipality, it needs to be well funded enough to continue updating that equipment and make sure that it's still efficient and it's operating. But it is a possibility in highly dense areas.
I just want to add on, I'm so excited for us to present to City of Eugene Sustainability Commission on our recommendations for this and then ways to make it more palatable and easy for the average consumer to do maintenance. Robin is really helpful with helping us figure out like what is the best way to do that and how do you educate, and we recorded an excellent training on Sunday to provide people to help them understand the benefits of it and the quick, easy, cheap way to save a lot.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, so this concludes our 2025 OASIS presentations. Amazing job. We really appreciate all of the support that mentors and advisors have given to our interns over the last 11 weeks. I know you put a lot of time and effort into it. And to all of our interns, thank you for all of your hard work. I know it's been a real push to get all of this work done and all of your deliverables completed. So, good job. Appreciate you. We want to hear what you're up to next. Please keep in touch. Let us know what you do next. We're happy to write letters of recommendation, anything you need. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yulia for just a few minutes. She's going to share some of the DEQ pollution prevention programs, and then we're going to have a quick OASIS video, and then we'll eat lunch. Smell of food in the kitchen, right? Then you will get pay more attention to the presentation. So yeah, you're absolutely okay. Very quickly, so pollution prevention programs at DEQ is not only what people can see. Sorry. Okay. So it's not only OASIS, but I think you guys know even more than me about OASIS, our internship. So I'm not gonna stop on this information today, but so we're gonna tell you a little bit about other programs. So all of them are funded by EPA through our pollution prevention grants, and some of here. So we work with our partners, organizations like Green, PRC, Sea Grant. And thank you so much. We just love working with you. And so some of the programs, it's food and beverage outreach. Buck is here, Carlos and Robin, you working with this grant. Eco-Beast outreach, I think Carlos works for a bit, right? Under this program. Safer Choice Assistance and OASIS, here we are. A few words about, I have a lot of information, but I'll say a few words. So, food and beverage, thanks to Brink, they are located in Eugene and they provide free on-site evaluation, technical assistance, and limited financial support. And some of the businesses, bakery, hot roaster, chocolaterie, patisserie, so ice cream shop, and these are amazing. All of them are located across all across the state, Oregon, Corvallis, Astoria, Eugene, Hood River. And usually they come and suggest to operate something to help them to cut down water usage or energy usage. And it could be something like they funded LED upgrades fully for total production, or they suggested them to switch to like pool chiller to reduce water usage. Or they recommend to install automatic door closer for walk-in coolers, of course, door gaskets, and so all amazing suggestions for them.
this is one will grow faster. Yeah, so all these amazing suggestions, and they even provide us some limited financial support, which is amazing. So you go to the website of Brink Recycling and you find food and beverage manufacturing partnership, and you follow the information. So, sign up for their newsletter, by the way, very interesting. So safer choice, this is what I'm proud of, to be honest, because here are like the businesses and everyone, I should be friends. So this is what I'm proud of, and I think you guys should learn about it as well. And just bring it to your house or just to your businesses, because these are the products with label safer choice, and they contain only safer ingredients. So all purpose cleaners, all cleaning products around. So it's funded by EPA as well. PPRC help us to work with this brand. And so these are some amazing product stories. You should go to the website epa.gov, safer choice, and use it at your production or at your home. Ecos, just the flyer of the example, everyone knows this brand probably, right? So, and EcoBiz, this program provides technical assistance to landscape and automated businesses all around Oregon as well. Amazing program, helps certify for these old businesses, and they do spill prevention training and helping them to switch to safer choice products as well. And this is the website. Everyone wants to learn about a little bit their learning hub. So there are a lot of very useful information for you. Go to their website, and here you can contact our Lisa. So all of you, you know her email, right? And talk more about this amazing prevention programs. That's it. Go anywhere, I'll pull up your.
Now you know all the answers.
Get this right.
We can hear it. We can hear it.
Well, we'll work on it. Worked earlier, but it's not working for us now. And what I can do is I can put this link in the chat as well. But we'll watch them. Yeah, minutes. All right, so we let's say goodbye to everyone online. Let's take a picture together. Oh, thank you so much for joining us. We'll let everybody go. If you want me to put a link for the video, just hang out for a few minutes, or you can email me and I can do that. And then we have Thai food in the kitchen. If anybody has a peanut allergy or a gluten allergy, just chat with me. I can talk about what food is gluten-free. Drinks, yeah, just let us know what you need. Thanks everyone for coming. Guys, everyone, please come together to take a picture, okay? Because I won't be able to catch you after lunch. So.
Where do you want the
Yeah,
picture
I
to
think
be?
like.
In front of the screen?
Yeah, over there, let's bring the banner. Oh, great. Can we show the banner? Yeah, stand it over there.
And who do you want in the picture, Julia?
Let's do like all together first, the old like whole audience, and then just interns. How about that?
Okay.
Fine, sounds good.
Okay, so everyone first, and then it's not intern. Yeah, get in there. No, everyone, everyone, see Sarah's there. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah, all of you get closer.
And then, yes, you.
Perfect. And you?
And then also.
You guys wanna do
Yeah.
this or direct use of pictures? I have still.
Okay, yes.
Okay, yeah. I hope this table is very solid enough. Yeah.
Oh.
I know. It's hard to stop me, you know, like. Okay, hope this table is solid enough. Very nice. Okay, one more. So when I want to like say something like OASIS all together, no, waving your hands for the video. So for the video, okay? So I'm gonna be moving like this from left to right. Okay.
No.
Back then. OASIS.
Give us a countdown.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Oh.
Should be longer. So I cannot fit everyone, so I'm moving from OASIS. Pollution prevention.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3. That is amazing.
All right, intern stay for there.
Right, only interns now.
Yeah.
Are we doing?
Yeah, and then just over like the zone. Next to the right, yeah, you're right. So. Oh my God. We'll be all the way there. Yeah. Nice. Perfect. Hi, here.
Okay, here.
We want to get there.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, right. Good job. Nice, we did it.
Anybody can get her step groups up to lunch first. Oh. Margaret said no. Please don't.